James Allison, talked about the W15 car again, and this time what he said is really important because it tells us where Mercedes is going with their race car. These kinds of hints are super important because Mercedes had 2 really tough years trying to figure out how their W13 and W14 cars worked, and now that Allison is back as the boss of making cars, every word he says is really important to F1 fans. The side parts of the car called side pods have been the most talked about part of Mercedes' car design for the past 2 years, so is Allison going to change these parts, and more importantly, where is Mercedes going for the next season? Mercedes had a really hard time understanding what went wrong in the past 2 seasons, and one big thing was when they won in Brazil last year, where Russell and Hamilton were awesome and got a 1-2 win, but Russell said later that this win made Mercedes think they could do better with their current zero-pod design of the car, which turned out to be a pretty wrong idea. But with Mercedes learning from their mistakes in testing that happened early in 2023 in Bahrain, and with the team from Brackley wanting to change everything they know about the car in 2024, were the side pods the only problem the car had in 2022 and 2023? If we look at the first upgrades, the simple answer would be no, and this is something Allison talked about in their latest interview about where the W15 is going. Mercedes brought a brand new design to Monaco, and the improvements were nowhere close to what Aston Martin did in the off-season and McLaren did in the middle of the 2023 season. This made Mercedes think that something is really wrong with the 2023 car, and the latest Saudi Arabia race proved this even more, where Wolff even said that if they took apart the car down to every tiny screw, they would find something that stops the car from working its best from a mechanical point of view. This is one reason why Mercedes is going down a path where we will see the W15 in a more normal way, but that doesn't mean they are changing how the side pods work. For example, even if Mercedes wanted to make their car more like Red Bull's style, they would be stopped by how narrow their chassis is, which Tony worked with that type of outside design of the car. The gearbox wasn't working its best either because it didn't fit right behind Russell and Hamilton's backs because of the same problem, and this is something they learned from Aston Martin's upgrades too. But according to Allison, even though not winning any races should be mostly blamed on the side pod design, it's not all because of them, since the whole car wasn't working right because of bad philosophy choices. Explaining this even more, Allison stressed how important it is to have a car that works properly in every way, and that doesn't only depend on what the side pods look like. As he said, "I don't see the world like you do, who looks at the sides and decides the concept. With our car, we definitely took a path that from the front of the nose to the back, it just wasn't good enough. What caught people's attention obviously were the sides, but they were definitely not the deciding factor. The concept was wrong from beginning to end, and the side pods are maybe the symbol of a team that took too long to understand which side they were on, but they were absolutely not the thing that sealed our fate." But with this in mind, a very interesting question comes up. Could Mercedes keep the same side pod design with the new concept of the car? If we look at the zero pod design, there's basically no way they're going to fit because Mercedes is changing their whole philosophy, which means a new chassis and a brand new gearbox to fit this concept too. But if we look at the other version of the car, one that had more normal side pods, then we could be having a discussion where Mercedes would think about changing every other part of the car to make the airflow better instead of the side pods. However, this is a wild guess, and we don't want to be making those in our videos, so for us to see where Mercedes is going in 2024 about the side pod question, we would have to wait until the car is shown in February. Now in 2022, Mercedes built a car that had too much rear downforce, and trying to fight that problem, the 2023 car turned out to be the complete opposite of the W13 with a pointy front end and a too narrow chassis. These are some of the problems that Hamilton tried to point out during the 2-year struggle of Mercedes, but for some reason the engineers back in Brackley, led by Mike Elliott, believed that there was more potential to be found from this unique approach, and when this turned out to be wrong, the only thing Mercedes ended up with was an 18-month period of trying to catch up with Red Bull. To make things worse, Mercedes is now having to fight McLaren, Ferrari and Aston Martin as well, because the improvements these teams made were good enough to fight with Russell and Hamilton for podium finishes. But if there is one team that has the facilities and the knowledge to turn things in their favor, that is definitely Mercedes. Toto Wolff said that lots of the mechanical parts are going to change, especially the gearbox combined with the chassis, because these are the areas where the W13 and W14 have been losing performance the most. Explaining this even more, Wolff went on to give hope for the W15's performance by suggesting that the team is taking a new approach, adding, "We are changing the concept. We are completely moving away from how we set up the chassis, the weight distribution, the flow. I mean, literally there's almost every part that's being changed, because only by doing that I think we have a chance we could get it wrong also. So between not gaining what we expect, catching up and making a big step in competing at the front, everything is possible." Furthermore, Wolff went on to say that the W15 should have around 2.5 seconds of performance gain compared to the W14, and if these numbers are true, then we should be listening to the British anthem a lot more often than what we did in 2023. Another good thing that goes towards Mercedes is that Red Bull has always said that they are afraid the gap is going to shrink a lot in 2024, which does sound hard to believe given the strict rules that are still in place, and the fact that they won 21 out of the 22 races in 2023. However, the teams that kept upgrading their cars in 2023 didn't miss out that much for the upcoming season. Mercedes is one of those teams, so if anything, the Brackley-based team will have a real shot at winning races more often than what they did in the past 2 years, but the hopes that Mercedes will be competitive in 2024 are not only present among the fans, they are present among the betting people as well. One betting site named My Betting Edge predicted that Hamilton's chances of winning the 2024 championship are at 28%, which is pretty high considering that his last race win was in the 2021 Saudi Arabia GP and that Mercedes has so much gap to close to Red Bull while trying to keep Ferrari, Aston Martin and McLaren behind them. But the fact that these teams made so much progress in the middle of the season shows that there is nothing Mercedes couldn't achieve if they had the right plan in mind. And as Allison said earlier this season, the team is on a very good path to becoming winners again. Explaining more about this, the technical director of Mercedes said, "You can't promise anything because everyone is working hard. All the teams are pretty good, but I think we are on a very good path. I think much of what hurts us now is reasonably understood, and we're working to fix that. I don't know if the W15 will look like a Red Bull. I have no idea what they're going to do next year. We'll find out when we all arrive next year. Still, Mercedes should not be underestimated, especially after bringing a new, less draggy gearbox to fit with a new chassis and suspension, because this is one of the most important things the team has learned about after watching McLaren and Aston Martin succeed in such a short time. This is something Wolff has emphasized heavily, putting a lot of importance on the fact that Mercedes has 2 customer teams that they could get live data from, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their solutions are going to work back in Brackley, with Hamilton changing his opinion quite quickly after seeing the W15 in the wind tunnel, from being heavily doubtful to massively optimistic that he would fight for a world championship. Do you think that Mercedes has what it takes to fight the battle right up to Red Bull's level with a new design? And more importantly, do you think they're changing the W14's weird side pods on the upcoming car? Let us know in the comments below.